Welcome to the Thrive podcast with the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church.
How does your faith kind of play into it, or does it play into it?
What can be done about it? When I say the church, I'm talking about evangelical white Christians and the black folk who attend their churches.
Hello, welcome to the Thrive podcast with the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. I'm Fred Jeff Smith, pastor of Shiloh, and I'm very happy that you chose to either view this on YouTube or listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, or Amazon Prime. And we always want to hear from you. Let us know how we're doing. You can reach me at fredjeffsmith@cox.net, fredjeffsmith@cox.net. And let us know how you're enjoying our podcast. I am honored today to have the Mayor President of East Baton Rouge Parish, Mayor Sharon Weston Broome, as our guest. Mayor, thank you for coming by today.
Thanks for the invite. I'm glad to be here.
So tell me how you ended up in Baton Rouge, because you're a northern girl, if I can say that, forgive me. And I thought I knew the story, but just before we started recording, you shared with me the story. So how is it that you ended up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana?
Well, Pastor, my story is kind of captured in a book by Isabel Wilkerson, The Warmth of Other Suns. And that's the story of African Americans who migrated from the South and went north for a better life because things were pretty rough back in the day, as they say. And so my father was born in Ethel, Louisiana.
Yes, ma'am. In
1903. And that wasn't too far removed from the Emancipation Proclamation, as you could imagine. So there were African Americans were still on a journey of opportunities. And so my dad, as a young man, moved to Chicago. And my mother, who was born in 1912, was in a little town called Kosciuszko, Mississippi.
I know Kosciuszko.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Oprah Winfrey put that on the map because that's where she was from. So she migrated to Chicago. And my parents married there. And after being there for a number of years, of course, I was born and raised there. And after being there probably 40, 50 years almost, my dad had this aha moment, the older he became, that he just couldn't tolerate that cold weather anymore. And so I had recently graduated from college. My dad said, we're moving south. And so, of course, I was about 21 then, and I gave it some thought, but family has always been very important to me. My mom and dad were just wonderful people, and so I was like, okay, I'm probably the one who can make this sacrifice and still continue my journey in life. And so we moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My dad had family here as well, of course, being from Ethel. And that was in 1979.
Yes, ma'am.
And I thought once I might leave after they got settled, but I fell in love with the people here. I fell in love with the food, and I fell in love with the hot weather. I can remember my first Christmas. I didn't have to put on a coat. No. I had on a sweater.
Yes.
That was all. That was it. That sealed the deal for me.
Yes, ma'am.
Sunshine, nice Christmas, and so that's how my journey started here in Baton Rouge.
So, your educational background was in broadcast journalism or communications.
Communications.
And so, when did the political bug strike you?
Yeah, I always, Pastor, when I look back on my life, I see these two corresponding paths. They're parallel. I saw the path of communications all through my life. I always enjoyed, reading poetry, making presentations at church and BTU, at school. I can remember one of my 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Gilchrist, I got up and recited something, and she said, "Thank you, Reverend Weston," because I just enjoyed doing it. And so that path of communications that thread was always in my life. And so I remember when I was in high school, I spent a summer at Indiana State University and a broadcasting seminar for high schoolers. And so it was no surprise that when I went to college, I majored in communications and thought that was where my journey was going to be, as an anchor. And looking up to people like Carol Simpson. But also that other parallel was the parallel of leadership, in that I was always active in school, whether it was student government, student council, whether it was the Black Student Association in college. I was always, those two paths were very consistent. And I think what happened, Pastor, is that there was an intersection of those paths that took place in 1988 when I felt a tug at my heart to run for city council to help be a part of the solution. Never carved out a path of running for elected office. It evolved, and never thought that my journey as a public servant would last this long, but it just evolved. And I have to tell you something that kind of rubs me the wrong way, and that's when people talk about career politicians.
Yeah.
Because I believe that public service is an honorable calling. I always tell people the part of public service that I'm involved in is a little different, because I offer myself for public service, and then people have to say yay or nay if they want me.
Right.
But I offer myself for public service, and so that's been my journey, and that public service journey has been the intersection of all those things that happened when I was growing up, my communications and my involvement in things like student government.
So you've served on every level of government. You've served city, parish, state, and now you're the chief executive of East Baton Rouge Parish. Help us to understand the distinction between being in a legislative position, which is pretty much what Metro Council is, and state rep and state senator. You've served in all of those capacities, and what it means to be an executive, to be mayor president. Help us to understand the difference.
Certainly the legislative branch at the local level, I will tell you, being on the Metro Council is you don't deal with a lot of philosophical issues, because really the core of what you deal with is surrounded with basic services at the local level. And in the legislature, in the legislative branch, I had the opportunity, to deal with some more philosophical issues. And now coming full circle back to local government, but as in the executive branch, the decisions that I make as the mayor president are certainly far-reaching. I have the opportunity certainly to set the vision and the tone. The level of influence is certainly greater. The responsibilities are more voluminous. Being responsible for over 4,000 employees, not only making sure that the services for the 450,000 people of this city are taken care of in this parish. So the executive branch certainly carries a additional level of weight and responsibility, but I certainly believe that those other experiences help prepare me for this, because my frame of reference, certainly surrounding government in general, was very strong. And when I was in the legislature, I had the privilege of serving as the Speaker Pro Tem in the House and the President Pro Tem of the Senate. So that leadership path certainly added value to my role as mayor president.
Baton Rouge politics seems to be extremely divisive at this point in time. I've lived here just about all my life. Spent a few years down in Egypt. That's what I call New Orleans. But the Lord let me come back to the promised land. But I, as someone who's lived here all his life, I don't quite remember a time in my lifetime, I'm sure somebody who's watching or listening can take issue with what I'm about to say, where things have been so openly divisive, probably not since I was a very small child in the 60s. I've asked this question of others who are either in political office or pursuing political office. The Metro Council, which is about to undergo a shift in those who sit in those seats, has been divided not just politically but racially. Do you think that the divisions within the Metro Council are more politically motivated or politically rooted, or more racially rooted, racially motivated?
Well, I believe that there's an intersection of politics and race. First of all, I believe that we do ourselves a disservice when we create districts of one race. Mm-hmm. When you have districts where they're all white or all black, because those that are elected in that office will tend to cater to the dominant population instead of considering, I think it would be a great exercise if we had diverse districts. Mm-hmm. So for the leaders, for the council members to use their influence to unite people around shared goals for that particular district and for the city. But going back to your question about the divisiveness that we see, on the council, I believe that a lot of it is a reflection of what has been going on nationally as well. I will tell you, when I was in the legislature, and I served in the legislature for 24 years, when I first started, you really didn't know who was a Democrat and who was a Republican unless they told you, mm-hmm. So why is that? Well, that's because people would interact with one another. You talk to one another. You go to this person for support. And, sometimes you would eventually know their political ideology. But there was not the level of combativeness mm-hmm. that I even see just looking on at the legislature right now. It has grown and grown and grown. And I think what we have is a reflection of what we've seen on the national level that has trickled down to state government and in many instances local government. Now, the issue is, can we get beyond that? Mm-hmm. And I really do believe we can. I believe what happened this year, saddeningly, a sad situation, but one of those moments that people have captured to move us forward. The killing of George Floyd really brought the issue of race and racism to a broad audience. I've heard people say that there were a lot of people who were at home mm-hmm. who watched that on television mm-hmm. and who, no matter what their political label was, felt that it was horrific and wrong. And so it started people to thinking about race mm-hmm. and racism. And so then from there, we had conversations that evolved. We had corporations that started talking about this is wrong, and we're committed to equity and inclusion and dismantling systematic racism. And then you had even people here in Baton Rouge who said, we've got to do better. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want us to lose that concern, lose that momentum around coming together around racial issues. But in order for us to do that, we have to have a level of, we have to have a desire, to want to see Baton Rouge close that racial gap that exists. We have to have a willingness on both sides to have empathetic conversations, to mm-hmm. have open-minded conversations with one another. But not only those conversations, Pastor, because so many times I hear people say, well, we've met on this, we've met on that, which is true. Mm-hmm. But we have to have corresponding action.
Right.
We have to have corresponding action moving forward, and we can't point the finger when that corresponding action takes place.
I believe that kumbaya moments have their place, but I'm fundamentally opposed to constantly coming to kumbaya moments where we sit around a table and everybody holds hands and then we go back to our separate places and nothing really changes. I believe that dialogue, protracted, raw, sometimes difficult dialogue is what really needs to take place. And then, as you say, action has to follow up on the dialogue. You mentioned about these one-race districts. Recently, a proposed change in the plan of government was brought to the Metro Council. And I'm curious as to what your position, we haven't talked about it. I'm firmly opposed to it. The whole idea of at-large council districts, and to me, what you're doing is you're asking for the parish to vote for 3 mayors, and
I agree with that.
And I don't think that that's for the benefit of the parish. What are your thoughts about?
I believe that we that certainly when you have a person who is at large, it even makes it, it's almost equal. Well, it is equal to the mayor president in terms of the votes that you have to get, etc. I know that some communities have a modified version of that, and I certainly think that the plan of government committee should look at some alternative methods. But it's not even just the at large; it's reapportionment.
Yeah,
it's reapportionment. Even in reapportionment, it is so obvious that some of the constructs of these districts are not only along the geographical lines, but they are on racial lines. I wasn't going to bring this up, but for example, this is not a district, but this is an example of what can happen. As you know, the proposed breakaway city carved out an area. Yeah. And that area excludes people of color.
Because they lost the first time.
Yeah. And so, we can't craft communities like that. Of course, we don't need breakaway communities at all. But when we do reapportionment, I believe that we have to look at those districts, certainly more intentionally. So that there's more diversity that represents, the city and the parish.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what we should do, and that I believe will help us as the community works towards shared goals on the council. I think that brings more understanding to the council. So I definitely think, while I don't think that at-large members are necessarily the route to go, I do believe that there are other prototypes out there that perhaps give us a more inclusive council when it comes to constituents.
You're a big proponent of looking outside of the city to try to find solutions. You did that with law enforcement. And you have done that in other areas of your administration. What is it that, what's the level of opposition to your philosophy of looking outside and trying to bring what you like to call best practices into the parish?
I wouldn't say that there's a heightened level of opposition around best practices. In some spheres, there has been resistance because, let's face it, some of our departments in city parish government are ingrained in a certain culture and attitude, and there's this belief among some that this is the way we've always done it, and we're
that's
satisfied.
What you hear.
Yeah, that's what we hear.
The mayor doesn't understand.
This is the way
we've always done it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you cannot build a vision of peace, prosperity, and progress around a narrative of this is the way we've always done it. You won't get there.
Yeah.
And leadership dictates that change is usually inevitable if you're going to be progressive, if you're going to make a better community. And we should be delighted that we're trying to achieve goals of best practices because that strengthens our city. It makes us a more attractive city to outsiders. It makes us a stronger city and a stronger community. I have talked with, now I will say that there are some things we're doing right in Baton Rouge that other mayors look at. I've had mayors talk to me about our infrastructure program and how we got that passed. But on the other hand, I've reached out to other mayors. I can think of one right now to see what are they doing to curb crime in their community. How are they addressing different issues? Because there are a lot of similarities that mayors experience in their cities. You may be a big city or a small, medium-sized city, but there are some common threads and common denominators that we all share as mayors. And so I want to hear what are y'all doing to do that, address this issue? And I think best practices should be the standard for our city.
With the push that's being made by certain corporations, as we're recording this, there's a meeting going on right now by a multi-billion-dollar corporation applying for tax credits. And I know that ITEP is it's a state program, but it affects local governments. I'm opposed to corporations getting permission to not pay property taxes. I wish that somebody would let me not pay property taxes. It doesn't work out that way. It's not really specifically the mayor's task to deal with that, but I'm sure that you have a position on it. Would you care to share your opinions about ITEP?
Yeah, I've had a number of discussions surrounding ITEP. And my position is that we have a law in place that was handed down from state government, in essence, that gave local communities, council, school boards an opportunity to weigh in on these applications. And I believe we haven't even had the opportunity to stay the course to see this be effective, to see if it works. And I know that there's another level that has been added where now if a company doesn't agree with what a council has said or what the school board has said, they can now go and appeal on the state level, which might be what's going on now.
Given by the governor because he was feeling pressure from corporations with regard to what he had done. You can't say that. I can. That's what happened.
So that's the other level that's been added.
Yes.
But I do believe that the original process has not had a chance to work, really. Now, this is what I will say, because as mayor, I have conversations with corporate America. I have conversations with community groups. I believe that there is some, how would I say it? I think the fear that exists on both sides a little bit could be dismantled if there was more conversations that took place and more understanding. I believe that some of the corporate folks feel like, oh, this group is just against us no matter what. They don't like us. And I don't see it like that.
No.
I don't see it like that. And I think that we can have some stability moving forward if there was less positioning adversarially and then coming together and see what is the common ground. And I know that it's been tried at some level, but some things, Pastor, some things come out with prayer and fasting.
Yes.
So that's what, we may, it may take a little bit more time to get there.
Louisiana has the most progressive tax system in the nation, and you tax poor people at a much higher rate than you tax everyone else. And to me, it's just greed that in addition to the advantages that you already have in taxes, you want to be exempted from paying your fair share in property taxes, which provide for infrastructure, which provide for schools, which provide for the higher quality of life that we say we want for everyone. You served on the state level. What's the opposition to reforming our tax system? Even black folk get mad at me when I say this. What's the opposition of getting rid of the homestead exemption?
It's one of those sacred cows that, I dealt with that as the whole tax structure issue, right, when I was in the legislature. And it's almost, I don't know what it will take to have those type of changes, because people have, I can't even remember when the homestead exemption started.
You were wrong.
Okay, yeah, so, yeah, I know it was a long time. It exists for, and so I believe that some people believe that we need to examine our tax structure, but it almost has to come from a separate body other than the legislature. Because if you are a legislator and you start talking about tampering with the homestead exemption, you might be in your last term as a state representative.
I saw it happen to Buddy Roman.
Yeah, because people feel so strongly about the homestead exemption.
Yes.
And that is something, it's sacred. People see it as sacred because they see it as maybe the one thing that's right now that's saving me money. But if you look at the overall tax structure, maybe it can be spread out in a different way. And I don't know the total resistance to it, other than it's been part of the fabric of Louisiana since Huey Long.
Yes. When you came into office, you had two immediate things that you had to deal with. One having to do with the Alton Sterling killing, which took place just before you assumed office. The other had to do with the historic floods that took place in August of 2016. You embraced both. You grabbed hold of both, and in my opinion, you did an outstanding job. What do you count as your greatest accomplishments in your first term? I count those two as being very high. What do you count?
I probably would put those two at the top of my list, because I remember, I think it was either my first week or second week, and I don't know, did you come to that meeting that I had with about the whole police reform?
Yes.
Yeah, and that was like when I first started, because I knew that was a critical issue that we had to address. And so I brought together members from the faith-based community, nonprofits, et cetera, and we talked about how can we implement reform, some not just reform, but some meaningful changes in our police department, so we would not have a recurrence of what happened in that officer-involved shooting. And as a result, we came up with putting use of force in policy, as part of Baton Rouge Police Department policy, because what had been said is that, we're taught this in the academy, but accountability does not occur unless it's policy. And so we were able to establish use of force policies. We were able to establish de-escalation. And, we started down other paths of implicit bias training and et cetera. And so I say that because now in this season that we're in, while we still have room for improvement in terms of our law enforcement and our Baton Rouge Police Department, we were really on the front end of these reforms that many of my colleagues and mayors in other cities just started dealing with because of what happened to George Floyd. I remember I was on a phone call with a mayor in another city on the West Coast. And we were on a panel, and Zoom panel, and she said, I'm going to take a bold step, and I'm going to get body cameras for our officers. That was this year. Well, there was a committee that started discussing body cameras before I came on. When I became mayor, I immediately took action and funded body cameras for all of our Baton Rouge police officers. And so steps like that, I believe, put us in the front. You know, Lord knows where we would be at this point now if we hadn't done those things early on. And we continue to work towards that. So I would say, you know, our efforts towards and Pastor, people don't sometimes when they say when you use the term police reform, they take it negatively. And I will tell you that for me, reform for our Baton Rouge Police Department means that we're building the best group of public servants that adhere to 21st century policing practices that have been outlined several years ago under the Obama administration, with what police departments all over look at as against the backdrop of what they deliver, because they cover all areas. And so, you know, my goal has always been to get us to achieve those pillars of 21st century policing. And sometimes that's a challenging, you know, task when people say, well, this is how we've always done it. So the work continues, but I would say our reform there, our work on flood mitigation in terms of the dollars that we've received, whether it's our stormwater master plan or the money for the 5 tributaries or making our DPW more effective. And lastly, I would say, you know, our largest infrastructure project in the history of Baton Rouge. I really can't stop there, though. I have to say, you know, because this is very important. There was not only a hue and cry for you know, police reform, flood mitigation, traffic, transportation, which we address, but the issues around disinvested communities, that was a hue and cry as well. And we didn't turn our back on that appeal. We've delivered in North Baton Rouge.
Yes, you have.
With a number of projects, whether it's Howell Place or now, thank God, the $5 million we've gotten for the Plank Road Corridor project. You know, there were people who wanted me to just do a tram that was about 3 miles, and I rejected that. And
wonder which part of town that was from.
And I rejected that, and now we've got you know, bus rapid transit that's going to start at Harding and go all the way down to LSU. And so I'm thankful for that work that we've done in disinvested communities, and the work continues. I mean, we can't hang our hat on that. We got to keep it moving. You know, we've got the choice neighborhood grants for Ardendale area, and we got to keep rolling with that. And I love the fact that we have some young entrepreneurs who came out of those communities who are now investing in those disinvested communities. And I want to help empower them as they lift up their communities as well.
2 quick questions. Are you in favor of the speed train between Baton Rouge and New Orleans?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And number 2, you mentioned contracts and entrepreneurs. It's been my opinion, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the headline has always been, we're going to make it more accessible to minority contractors to play a role in government contracts. But there's always a fine print problem where these entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs, often don't meet the guidelines in order to be qualified for contracts. Is there anything that your administration can do to help mitigate that problem?
Absolutely. We just, in addition to our equity in business seminars that we host, where we give minorities, small businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses opportunities to understand how to navigate the process, we now have a joint venture as a result of our disparity study that we did, where Baton Rouge government, city parish government, along with BREC and the Baton Rouge Airport, we are now doing a joint DBE certification process.
Help me with DBE, please.
Doing disadvantaged business enterprises.
Okay.
And so in getting people to get certified, we will be training them in that process of what they need to be certified, which will take them to the next level of securing contracts with each one of the entities. And so also it means that if you do this joint certification, then it means you can do work with city parish, you can do work with BREC, and you can do work with the airport. So we're definitely trying to make it very clear and carve out a path through training and information for those minority businesses who desire to do business with city parish government. And I'm very delighted about the work that we've been doing in that space. I saw a young lady last night who has her own company as an engineer. She's an African-American female, and she was very grateful because she's been able to do work with the city, but prior, she said, it wasn't there. It wasn't a priority, in past years. And so all of that helps strengthen our community, Pastor. Some people think, oh, well, you're caring about one community over another. No. We have to understand that when we bring equity and inclusion to our community, it makes our community as a whole a stronger community.
Yes.
And so that's what I want people to understand. It's not that I care about one group over another or this or that. I care about this entire city and parish, but I recognize that as I use in my simplistic teacher mode, you can't have part of your city at a D grade and part at an A grade and think it's okay. You got to get that D grade up because we're all one city and one community, one parish. Yeah, so.
St. George. We touched on it, and I said I was going to leave it over there, but it's a peeve of mine. I lived in that area during the first time that they were doing the petitions, and my wife was determined at that point, we ain't living in St. George. If that means we have to move, we ain't living in St. George. Subsequently, we did move. As you said, they pared down the geography in order to fit the demographic that was favorably disposed toward forming another city. They got the vote that they needed, but you have asked a simple question. Show us the data that lets us know how you're going to handle the finances of this so that it is not a burden on the rest of the parish. And they have not been able to provide you with that information. What do you think will be the outcome of and I know it's a court case, but what are your thoughts about where this is going?
Well, my thoughts are that if the proponents of the breakaway city of St. George had a plan, that they would have showed it to us by now. And I think that before they even started this effort, that there should have been a plan. They should have been transparent with the people who would be impacted in that area, as well as all of us in this city and parish, with their plan of action.
Well, there was a plan.
But
the plan was an independent school system.
Yeah, but that's
the plan wasn't an actual municipality. The plan was an independent school system.
But now you've asked for a city.
Yes.
And so the vote was, okay, let's have a city, but now there are some subsequent efforts that need to take place. Okay, what is your plan for a city? How are the taxes going to go up?
Yes, they will.
And the taxes. What about your your legacy costs? How's that going to be impacted? What about what are you going to do in a crisis? This city would be the size of Lake Charles, about 86,000 people. My good friend, Mayor Nick Hunter, who's a first-term mayor, has had calamity after calamity just in a quarter, of this year. And who would be leading you out of this or leading you through this, and who would be the person who would devise a emergency management plan for a city of that size? How would you navigate that? And what kind of dollars would it take to do that? But even beyond that, what are your expectations of city parish government? What do you want city parish to pay for?
Yes.
What responsibilities do you want us to carry? All of that should be mapped out in a plan. If you build a house, you're not going to build a house without a plan.
Yes.
Your architect is going to have a plan. You just don't say, oh, I want a house, a 5-bedroom house, 2 bathrooms, and they're like, okay, even if there's a prototype, it's a plan.
Yes.
In terms of constructing it.
Yes.
If you are a business person and you want a loan from the bank as a business, what is your business plan before we give you this money? So plans are part of creating and establishing, whether it's your business, whether it's your house plans. You should definitely have a plan for a city that size, and the people should know it. Transparency. One of the things, Pastor, that we've been very focused on in my administration is transparency. You can go to our website. You can see through open checkbook all the checks that we've written. You can see the money, your tax dollars, where they're going. All of that is transparency. And we haven't even been able to get a level of transparency from the organizers in how they're going to establish this city.
Yeah.
And so contrary to what some people believe, we're not protesting the election. What we're saying is prescribed by state law. Since you couldn't give me a plan just by me asking for one as the mayor president, law prescribes that I have the legal ability to ask for a plan.
Sure.
And that's what we're doing. Sure. All I want is a plan.
I understand.
And I think if they had one by now, I would have seen it.
It's interesting that people are filing to be annexed into Baton Rouge and not into St. George, which means that there are a whole lot of other people who are looking for the same things that you're looking for, and they have not been able to see it either. I just wanted to make that point. I don't like St. George. But the whole idea of St. George is problematic for me. Getting back to law enforcement, just a couple more items, and I'm going to let you go. I appreciate your time. I think that one of the best things that you ever did was hire Murphy Paul as chief of police. I think he has been outstanding, and kudos to you for hiring him, selecting him. You have not had the most wonderful relationship with the Baton Rouge Police Union, and would you care to speak about the union versus the chief, the union?
Well, can I start off talking about the chief?
Yeah. Sure.
The chief, I am so thankful that we have Chief Murphy Paul as our police chief. I have grown to respect him even more since the first decision of hiring him. I tell him all the time, I know that was one of the best decisions I made hiring him. He's certainly he's had to deal with the whole mindset of this is how we've always done it, but he's stayed the course, so kudos to him. What I think people need to understand is that the Baton Rouge Police Union is a separate entity from the Baton Rouge Police Department. And some people think that when you talk about the union, you're talking about the department. Two different entities. The department is the department. The union is a group, an organization that represents many of the officers in the department. I have not really picked a fight with the union, but I cannot condone, behavior that does not help move this city forward in terms of the progress for our Baton Rouge Police Department. You cannot you cannot condone bad behavior among the ranks just because of the brotherhood, sisterhood. True leadership dictates that you have to, when something is wrong, that you should be, if you're an organization, it makes your organization and the members, it taints them when you have people, bad apples in your organization, and no matter what, you stick with them. And so I just think that there's some course of action that could be improved with the union that could show that they really want to work collaboratively with Chief Paul, that they want not only what's best for the members that they represent, but they want what's best for this city and parish. And I believe demonstrating that would certainly remove a lot of the adversarial tone that surrounds that organization.
You said that so nice. You have not picked a fight with the union, but the union has certainly tried to pick a fight with you, and they've done it consistently and repeatedly. And you were very, very nice about it. The Police Officers' Bill of Rights. That's a state legislature thing, not a city thing, but it impacts municipalities. I've been serving on a state legislature police de-escalation committee that Senator Fields has put together, and I have learned a couple of things from this. And one of the disheartening things is you don't often know where to go to get relief for the questions that you have. Some things are municipal, some things are state, some things are geographic, regions, and there seems to be no uniformity to that. But when it comes to the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, the pervasive belief is that police officers receive a level of indemnification that regular citizens or non-police officer citizens don't receive, and people are irritated and angered by that. I know it's a legislative thing. You're the mayor, but you do have a voice in that. What are your thoughts about the Police Officers' Bill of Rights?
Well, I will tell you first and foremost that you're on point when you talk about the different levels where the answers are, right? Because people come to us and they're like, well, why can't you do A, B, C, D, E, with this officer? Why can't you do, and that police Bill of Rights impacts a lot of the processes that exist in the Baton Rouge Police Department that the chief has to adhere to. I am hearing from community members and, even people in law enforcement that it certainly needs to be revisited, which I believe may be one of the outcomes of Senator Fields' commission. But I also know that many people who supported it didn't realize the impact that it was going to have on local governments in terms of reform and making changes when necessary. So I certainly think that it should be revisited, and this commission, I believe, is a good point of discussion for people to really understand. And Pastor, let me say this. I think, I think that people recognize that we are not against the police. You and I probably may have family members, friends. I have
several members of this church who are members of the Baton Rouge Police Department.
Exactly. I have friends, I have neighbors who are police officers, and we value the role that they play in keeping our community safe, and we thank them. I believe what we have seen over the years is that there's been an increase of behavior by certain officers that's very concerning for communities of color. And the goal is to improve that. And one of the things that Chief Paul is doing, which I love, he's bringing in community organizations and individuals who've had certain experiences with officers so they can share in a non-threatening environment how they interpret their interaction and what has happened. So our new officers coming on will have a better sense of what the community is really feeling, what organizations really think, and hopefully they will put that in their toolkit, as they guard and protect, as they serve and protect. And so I'm optimistic. I mean, our new classes are diverse. They look like the city and parish in which we live in. And I was so happy to hear one recent graduate who said, and his father was a police officer, and so I guess he's second generation maybe. He said, I grew up in this community. I know this community. I want to serve this community. And so that was very refreshing, because here you have a young man that, obviously understands the community that he grew up in, and not only understands it, but has a heart to serve the community. And I believe we know that our officers put their lives on the line. We thank them for their service. But when we hear about community policing, I think what that young man just said epitomizes what community policing, part of the community policing scenario. And so I certainly would like to see that grow. But I definitely think that that the Bill of Rights will be revisited and examined, especially, when I was a legislator, oftentimes we had to come back and tweak what we said, legislation. All of it wasn't necessarily thrown out, but after it was implemented, they were like, well, this might be a little problematic. This might be a little problematic. So let's amend it or tweak it a little bit moving forward.
What are your expectations about redistricting statewide as a result of the census? Do you think that we're going to get a little bit more of the balance that you were speaking of with regard to Metro Council districts when we redistrict for the state? Because right now there seems to be a preponderance of conservative Republican districts that exist within the state of Louisiana.
I believe that so at the end of the day, a lot of what goes on at the state legislature, as you well know, and it ends up in who has the most votes. You can have a good idea. You can have a great district that you want to see happen as a result of redistricting that you think is fair, equitable, and if you don't have the votes, it doesn't happen. But that doesn't mean you give up. That's where advocacy among citizens is important. Citizens have the power of advocacy, and so it's important that during this season of redistricting that people pay close attention and that they let their voices be heard in this process. One of the processes where we talk about letting people, that your voice is heard, is at the ballot box. But it doesn't just stop there. When you go down to a hearing that's taking place on redistricting and you've looked at the map and you see some concerns that you have, you should speak up. Or if there's a plan that you embrace that you think will make representation more equitable, you should say something about that. And I will tell you this: redistricting takes some courage and it takes some intentionality to make it happen. And look, I'm going to be realistic. There's some give and take in the process. There's some negotiation in the process, but I believe that we, and hopefully everybody filled out their census, I'm optimistic that maybe we can see another district created on the congressional level. I don't know where it's going to come out of, but there are some opportunities. Let me say, I think there are some opportunities.
You're more optimistic about that than I am. I'm more concerned about these 70%, 75%, 80% white districts, 70, 75, 80% black districts, which is exactly what you were speaking of on the Metro Council level. If I live in an 85% white district, my representative isn't going to care a whole lot about what I think, because I don't represent a big enough, my constituency is not large enough for him to give any more than surface attention to. If we had more racially balanced state districts, state legislature, state senate, then I think that legislators would have to pay a little bit more attention to what it is that you say. And so my hope, forget about Congress, my hope is that on the state level, that we see some positive changes where that's concerned. Last question, last topic, and COVID. As some people are starting to call it out, the COVID. Where is East Baton Rouge Parish with regard to COVID-19? Because we see on the national level that spikes are taking place in other parts of the country. How are we doing with regard to COVID?
Well, compared to other states and areas, we've been on a good track in terms of COVID mitigation. But I'm a little concerned of recent numbers that have come out with our positivity rate. And the positivity rate means the number of positive cases within people who are getting tested. It is elevating, and so that means that we could be going in reverse to situations and circumstances that existed in phase 1 and phase 2. So my message, and I'm sending out a strong message these days, is that you've heard this term, we can't succumb to COVID fatigue. I know people, but this has been going on almost a whole year, 9 months.
Yeah.
And after a while, people get tired. They want to see their friends. They want to fellowship. They want to party. They want to get together. But all of that adds to a resurgence. And so my message is we got to wear these masks. We've got to social distance. We've got to mitigate and make sure that we're doing those basic procedures of staying within your pod of people. Your home. Thanksgiving is approaching, and there are people who want to. I heard somebody say, "Well, we're having, about 30 people over our house." I don't know if that's I don't know if that's going to be a good mitigation effort right there. I get the wanting the family together, but we have to be very guarded as we go into the holiday season. That and our medical professionals are telling us we need to be on guard, because we are setting ourselves up on another trajectory of increase that's going to set us back. And listen, I have always said that we have got to look out for the health and well-being of our citizens, and we can also look out for our economy as well. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. But, we've made some strides in terms of opening our economy.
Yes.
And I know people don't want to see us go backwards, because they've been clamoring about opening up the economy. We've made some progress in that area. So we, from an economic and business point of view, if we don't mitigate, if we don't pay attention to what's going on in the health side of this COVID-19, then it's going to have an impact on us going back to some phase 1 and phase 2 issues. So I'm encouraging everybody, don't let your guard down. Make sure that you stay on this path of wearing a mask and social distancing. And we now have over 40 sites where people can get tested. We've come a long way, and we've recognized the health disparities that exist that are embedded in COVID-19 as well, and we've been working on those disparities. But we now have 40 testing sites, and so we also know, Pastor, that COVID is not a respecter of persons, and so even with those people who have underlying conditions, there are people all over, young, middle age, old, Black, white, who are having COVID. So the coronavirus, and so we've got to dismantle any politics that surrounds this pandemic, and we've got to take what I call embrace some short-term discomfort for long-term gain.
The runoff is scheduled for December 5th. We have tried unsuccessfully to reach out to your opponent, who has seen fit to be otherwise engaged. That seems to be the language that his campaign is using. We're here. I just wanted you to know we are here in case you're interested in responding to what we're saying. So I typically ask the question of my guests about whether or not you want your children to be raised in Baton Rouge. I know children make their own choices and what have you, but I believe in Baton Rouge. I love Baton Rouge. And I see a whole lot of brain drain that takes place where we educate them here and then they go off in other places. If you want to talk to that, that's fine. But if you wanted to use the last couple of minutes to talk about the runoff, please feel free to say whatever you want to say.
I will say two things. I want our best and brightest to stay in Baton Rouge, and I want to continue to create an environment that's attractive, which means jobs and opportunities. I want to nurture that entrepreneurial spirit that I see among so many of our young people, and continue to pursue opportunities like we had with eBay's Retail Revival Program and our Baton Rouge Resilience and our Procurement Opportunity Program, so they will stay here. But I believe that we're in a moment where the power of leadership cannot be underestimated in this season that we're in. And I certainly believe, and I thank the people for entrusting me over the past 4 years to lead in some critical situations. But I believe in Baton Rouge. I believe in the people here, and I believe our better days are ahead. We all know from a biblical perspective, as I said earlier, that sometimes we have those valley experiences, but I believe our better days are those mountaintop experiences await us. If we all work together, we can see it happen.
Thank you, Mayor President, for taking the time to share with us today. I have truly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you all for viewing. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back again next time.